Everyone thought Bob Gauchie was dead. The search planes had gone home. His wife had begun preparing for a memorial. On a frozen lake in the Canadian Arctic, he had no working radio, almost no food, frostbite in his feet, and only the thin metal shell of a bush plane between him and temperatures that could kill a person in hours. But 58 days later, a plane that was late, low, and slightly off its usual path caught a single flash of sunlight on the ice. And beside a crippled aircraft, the rescuers saw something impossible. A living man, standing up, waving. On February 2nd, 1967, Gauchie left Cambridge Bay in a single-engine de Havilland Beaver, the kind of rugged bush plane that made life in the Canadian North possible. This was not supposed to be a dangerous journey. He knew the route to Yellowknife. He had flown northern weather, northern distances, and northern silence for years. In the cargo area were frozen fish, mail, and supplies for communities that depended on pilots like him. At home, his wife Fran was waiting for him to return. To everyone who knew him, Bob was experienced, careful, and capable. If anyone could cross that country safely, it should have been him. 2 hours into the flight, the Arctic changed its face. The horizon vanished. Sky, ground, and cloud collapsed into one sheet of white. In a whiteout, distance becomes meaningless. The eye can no longer tell whether the aircraft is climbing, descending, turning, or flying straight into the earth. Gauchie switched his focus to the instruments, exactly as a trained pilot should. But this was the first moment when the story stopped being about skill. It became about what happens when skill is not enough. Then the instruments began to betray him. The artificial horizon failed. The turn and bank indicator became unreliable. The compass was no longer giving him the certainty he needed. Every tool designed to keep a pilot oriented in blind weather seemed to fall away at the same time. Fuel was running low. Gauchie radioed for help and received a faint answer. Find a safe place to land, activate the emergency transmitter, and rescue would come within hours. Those words must have sounded like a rope thrown across the storm. He only had to land and wait. He found a frozen lake and brought the Beaver down intact. It was an extraordinary landing under impossible conditions. The aircraft was upright. The wings were not torn away. The cabin was shelter. For a moment, survival seemed almost certain. Then Bob reached for the equipment that was supposed to tell the world where he was. The radio failed. The emergency transmitter failed. The crash position indicator failed. One by one, the lifelines went silent. The promise of rescue in a few hours disappeared into the same white emptiness that had trapped him. Bob counted what he had, because counting is what a person does when panic would waste strength. A rifle. A small supply of ammunition. A few signal flares. Matches. Emergency rations meant for a short delay, not a second life. 2 sleeping bags. Heavy clothing. A notebook. Fuel that could melt snow into drinking water, but not enough to waste casually. And in the cargo hold, a load of frozen Arctic char, so solid in the cold that eating it became a problem of fire, fuel, and time. He understood the math quickly. Water mattered first, heat second, food third. One careless decision could kill him faster than hunger. While Bob settled into the aircraft, search crews were already in the air. To his family, to his friends, and to the pilots who knew the northern routes, it seemed impossible that he could simply vanish. But the Arctic is not a map. It is a country of distance, glare, wind, and deception. Search aircraft swept the region where they believed he should be. Bob was somewhere else. From the ground, he imagined engines coming closer. From the air, the searchers saw only white, shadow, and thousands of frozen lakes that looked exactly alike. On the 4th day, Bob heard an engine. Hope hit him like electricity. He ran from the aircraft and fired a flare into the sky. Then another. A plane passed nearby, close enough that it must have felt like rescue was already reaching down. But it kept flying. In the whiteness, a man, a plane, and a thin streak of signal fire could vanish completely. Days later, he tried again. And again. Each flare was not just a signal. It was a piece of hope leaving his hand and burning out above him. After days of searching, the official effort ended. To the authorities, the conclusion was brutal but practical. A pilot lost in that cold for that long could not still be alive. At home, Fran received the kind of message no family ever wants to see. There are moments when grief arrives before death is proven, because hope has become too painful to hold. In the South, people began speaking of Bob in the past tense. On the ice, Bob knew none of this. He was still waking up, still melting snow, still waiting for a rescue that had already stopped looking. Bob survived by building a world small enough to control. He melted snow at specific times. He rationed food with discipline. He moved around the plane to keep his body working, but not so much that he burned calories he could not replace. He checked the weather. He checked his feet. He wrote in his notebook. In a place designed to erase human will, routine became a wall. It did not make him safe. It did not make him warm. But it gave the day a shape, and as long as the day had a shape, he had something to follow. By the third week, the emergency rations were nearly gone. The remaining fish could not simply be eaten. It demanded heat, and heat demanded fuel. Fuel was water. Fuel was life. So Bob made a decision that sounds almost impossible from a warm room. He would eat less so he could live longer. Hunger became part of the plan. His body began spending itself to keep him alive. His clothing loosened. His hands shook. Every movement became heavier. But he had made a bargain with time. If rescue needed one more day, he would try to buy that day with his own body. Then came the feat. First the pain, then the numbness, then the color that told him the cold was no longer outside him. It was taking territory. Bob knew what gangrene could mean in an isolated place. He kept an axe close, not because he wanted to use it, but because survival sometimes forces the mind to prepare for unthinkable choices. Each morning he inspected his toes. Each morning he was still just healthy enough not to do the thing he feared. The Arctic was no longer only waiting for him to freeze. It was trying to take him piece by piece. Far away from the lake, not everyone was ready to bury him. Friends and fellow pilots raised money and kept searching after the official effort ended. They hired private aircraft. They followed hope when logic said hope was over. But the North has a way of defeating even loyal people. Flight after flight found nothing. Fuel, weather, distance, and money ran down. Eventually, even the private searchers had to face the answer the Arctic seemed to be giving them. Fran began preparing a memorial for a husband whose body had never been found. Around the 6th week, wolves appeared at the edge of his small world. They did not need to attack. They only needed to wait. They circled beyond the tracks he had made in the snow, silent and patient, another reminder that nature was watching. Bob still had ammunition, but every bullet was a future option he could not afford to waste. So he watched them back. In the strange arithmetic of isolation, even wolves became company. They were proof that he was not the only living thing left on the lake. Then a raven came. It perched near the aircraft and stared through the glass as if it knew something. To another man, it might have felt like an omen. To Bob, it became a listener. He spoke to it because speech kept him human. He gave shape to thoughts that otherwise would have turned inward and dark. The bird could not rescue him, could not answer him. But in that frozen emptiness, a pair of living eyes mattered. Sometimes survival is not dramatic. Sometimes it is simply refusing to let silence be the only voice in the room. Eventually, the wolves left. The raven left too. They had found easier food somewhere beyond the lake. Or perhaps they had decided this stubborn human was not ready to become part of the snow. Their departure should have been a relief. Instead, it made the silence larger. Bob had lost the searchers. He had lost the sound of engines. He had lost the small comfort of being watched by animals. Now the lake gave him nothing back. No movement. No voices. No reason to believe anyone on Earth still imagined him alive. His notebook changed. At first, it was a survival document: fuel, weather, rations, condition. Later, it became a place to leave himself behind. He wrote to Fran. He wrote to his daughters. He tried to explain that he had not stopped trying to come home. The pages were not written for rescue anymore. They were written for love. He knew there was a real chance no one would ever read them, that the aircraft would become a metal tomb under spring snow and summer melt. Still, he wrote, because love, even when it cannot change the weather, can keep a man facing tomorrow. By the 58th morning, everything that could be stripped away had been stripped away. Food was gone. Strength was nearly gone. His feet were damaged. His family believed he was dead. The official search was history. The private search had faded. Even the animals had abandoned the lake. And yet he woke up. That was the whole victory for that morning. He woke up and did not choose surrender. He rose slowly, painfully, into another day that had offered him no promise at all. That afternoon, a private aircraft crossed the region on a flight that should have passed through history unnoticed. It was late. It was flying in different light than usual. Its route and altitude placed it where the earlier search planes had not saved him. This is the part of the story people call luck, and it was luck. But luck still needed something to find. It needed glass that could catch the sun. It needed a survivor who had kept the aircraft visible. It needed a man who had not died the day before. Then came the flash. A brief reflection from the windshield of Bob's Beaver struck the eyes of the men in the passing aircraft. It lasted only a moment, the kind of moment most people miss without ever knowing it existed. But something about it did not belong to the landscape. The pilot banked. The aircraft turned back. After 58 days of silence, the first real sign of rescue was not a radio call, not a flare, not a shouted voice. It was sunlight bouncing once off glass. On the second pass, they saw the aircraft. Then they saw the figure. Not wreckage. Not a body. A man standing beside the plane, waving. Imagine what that must have felt like from the air, to circle a frozen lake expecting only a crash site and instead find a human being still fighting to be seen. Bob raised his signal pistol and fired the pattern he had rehearsed in his mind for weeks. His body was failing. His discipline was not. When the rescue aircraft landed, Bob did not collapse into panic. He did not deliver a speech. He came forward with the calm dignity of a man who had spent all his fear already. He was thin, frostbitten, bearded, and carrying a small suitcase, as if he had merely been waiting at a remote stop for a very late ride. The words he offered were almost unbelievable in their understatement. Did they have room for one more passenger? In that sentence was everything that had kept him alive. Humor, restraint, and the refusal to let the Arctic take his identity. In Yellowknife, doctors saw the cost of the miracle. Bob had lost more than 50 pounds. Frostbite had scarred him deeply, and damaged toes had to be removed. His body had survived by consuming itself. When his family saw him, recognition did not come instantly. He no longer looked like the man who had left Cambridge Bay in February. But he was alive. For the people who had mourned him, the news felt almost impossible to trust. A man they had prepared to bury had walked back into the world. Recovery took months. Walking had to be learned again with a body changed by frostbite and starvation. But Bob Gauchie did not leave the sky behind. In time, he returned to flying in the north, though people who flew with him remembered how careful he became. The ordeal did not make him reckless. It made him exact. Later, his name would be tied to Northern aviation history in another way through Buffalo Airways. But none of that erased the lake. The lake remained the place where every assumption about human limits had been tested. When people asked what saved him, the easy answers were equipment, training, toughness, and luck. All of those mattered. But they were not the whole answer. Equipment failed. Training could not create a signal. Toughness could not make food appear. Luck arrived only after 58 days. What carried Bob through was smaller and harder. Each morning, he decided not to become the man who gave up that day. He did not survive 58 days all at once. He survived one morning, then one afternoon, then one night, again and again, until the impossible had a chance to happen. The rescue is the part we remember. The late airplane, the low flight, the 1-second flash of sunlight, the men who turned back. But the miracle did not begin with the flash. It began on every morning nobody saw. It began when the search ended and Bob still melted snow. When hunger came and he still measured fuel. When frostbite came and he still wrote to his family. When silence came and he still woke up. A miracle may look sudden from the outside. From the inside, it is often built quietly, one decision at a time.